Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we're ready. Morning. Anybody got any prayer requests, anything before we get going?
I do. I just found out that my older sister was having a lot of medical problems.
Okay. Norris Caraway? Okay. Okay. Probably. That's Memorial at 2? At 2? Okay. Okay. Give your mom in your prayer. She's got something going on with her, some nerve in her hip or something, and she's on crutches currently. She can't walk. She's at home. My mom, she's got a pinched nerve or something in her hip, and she's on crutches currently. It got real bad last night, and she's having a hard time walking. All right, Silas leads in a prayer here, and we going.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, so thank you for this new day that you've given us, for the time we have together to study the Word. We ask you to bless our study together this morning. Learn more about your people, learn more about your plan, and how that applies to us today. Thank you so much for your Word that you've given us. We can trust in it, you've proven yourself through it. We have a plan, we have a roadmap for this life. We ask that you do with those that are on our hearts and our minds, those that are just mentioned, who are struggling with different illnesses, we hold those answers, we heal, bring those concerns to you, and we pray for healing. We continue to be with the Fairway family, the lost Norris, with all the family and friends affected. That you do with Danielle, she's struggling with her head. We resolve quickly and be on the same. And we pray that you do with our time together this morning as we move into worship. Please do accept what you do.
All right, we'll start in Joel this morning. Joel chapter 1. It's a pretty short chapter. It's only 20 verses. I think it's kind of funny. He's a prophet, one of the minor prophets. I thought it was kind of funny that God sent a man to talk to his people, whose name is Joel, means Jehovah is God. Most scholars think that Joel takes place around 835 BC. That places it around the time of Queen Athaliah. She was the ruler of Judah. And I'll read a little excerpt on her from 2 Chronicles chapter 22. Talks briefly about her. She took power of after her son dies. 22, starting verse 10. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehoshabeth, the daughter of the king, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were about to be put to death. And she put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus Jehoshabeth, the daughter of King Joram, and wife Jehoiada, the priest, because she was a sister of Ahaziah, terrible pronouncing that name, Ahaziah, hid him from Athaliah so that she did not put him to death, and he remained with them 6 years, hidden in the house of God, while Athaliah reigned over the land. She reigned 6 years. After 6 years, the people killed her badly. She was not a good ruler. She practiced all the idol worship and paganism that all the other wicked kings had done. So that's kind of like a frame of reference of where Joel takes place. Again, that's where most historians place it. I'm going to read the first 4 verses here. The word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel. Hear this, you elders. Give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in your days, or in the days of your fathers? Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children to another generation. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. Verses 2 and 3, he starts out by saying to the people, have you ever seen something like this in your lifetime? He says, tell your children and your children's children, and so on. He's trying to convey to them that, don't forget this. Don't forget what's happened here. He's trying to get them to understand this is important. Also, I forgot to mention, pretty much, I'd say probably like 80% of all the scholars and commentators think that, say that Joel is not a what's the word, prophetic book. It's not like a parable. It's it's like straightforward. He's just trying to turn the people. There's no double meaning. Like there's a few people who think that when it's talking about the locust, and later on it mentions like an army. Some people believe that he's actually using the locusts discussing an army, but the vast majority of scholars think that it's just straightforward. He's literally talking about locusts. But yeah, then verse 4, it lists basically a locust plague. So it seems that Joel's using that must be happening in the country at the time. But he's trying to use it as to persuade the people to turn to God, as kind of a illustration of what that must have looked like, because it had to have been pretty severe. I actually read about the locust disaster in Israel in 1915, which I didn't know about. I looked that up. But some of what I read on it was it began in February in 1915, and within a month, the people were seeing clouds of locusts so great that it darkened out the sky and in some cases even blotted out the sun. That's how thick they were. They came and then through and they destroyed all the crops, and then they began to lay eggs. I learned that locusts, they lay eggs in bundles like the size of a grain of rice. So it's a little cluster, and they lay them in groups of 80. They've studied this, and in 1 square meter, they found as many as 1,000 clusters of locusts. So in about 3 square feet, they found about 80,000 locust babies. Yeah, it's a substantial amount of locusts. But yeah, during this attack in 1915, once the eggs hatched, the locusts, they can't fly yet, and so they basically just crawl across the land. And I don't remember what the time frame was, but eventually they get where they can hop, and so they basically like just marched across the land, just completely eliminating every form of vegetation. The pictures are impressive. Some people reported getting motion sickness from watching the locusts move across the land like an ocean. Yeah. No, that'd be horrifying. Yeah. And they lost anywhere from 60 to 100% of the crops, depending on, certain areas. But yeah, it was pretty bad. They started using like traps and fire to kind of try to put even a slight dent in them. They basically just ate themselves to death, though. They got rid of all the food supply. So anyway, that's kind of that's likely the kind of situation that Joel is using here. It's probably what they're going through during this time. Trying to use it to get them to see that the error of their ways. One commentator, this is a quote from a commentator. He wrote, "God is Lord of hosts and has every creature at his command, and when he pleases can humble and mortify a proud, rebellious people by the weakest and most contemptible creatures." And then another thing that Dad actually pointed out to me was in Deuteronomy 28. I'll read two verses. One is 15. 28:15 reads, "But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you." And then it lists a whole bunch of curses. But if you jump over to verse 38, it says, "You shall carry much seed into the field and shall gather in little, for the locust shall consume it." So way back long ago, God warned them the consequences of what their actions. And if they don't follow God's law, what will be the result of that? Mm, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I couldn't imagine living through something like that. They it happened again like 30 years later, or no, like 20 years later, again in Israel in the 1930s. But at that time they started using like flamethrowers and just scorching everything, trying to eliminate them. Yeah. All right, let's read. I'm going to read the next three verses, 5, 6, and 7. "Awake, you drunkards, and weep, and wail, all you drinkers of wine, because of the sweet wine, for it is cut off from your mouth. For a nation has come up against my land, powerful and beyond number. Its teeth are lion's teeth, and it has the fangs of a lioness. It has laid waste my vine and splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it down. Their branches are made white." So here Joel's basically saying, you all need to wake up and pay attention to what God's trying to tell us. He goes on to describe the infestation like an invading army. And yeah, they basically lay waste to everything in their path. Read 8 through 12. "Lament like a virgin wearing sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth. The grain offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord. The fields are destroyed, the ground mourns. Because the grain is destroyed, the wine dries up, the oil languishes. Be ashamed, O tillers of the soil. Wail, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field has perished. The vine dries up, the fig tree languishes. Pomegranate, palm, and apple, all the trees of the field are dried up, and gladness dries up from the children of man." This is a very poetic description of the nation in its current state. Joel tells them there in verse 8 to be, they should be as mournful as a young widow. It says their food and wine offerings are cut off because of their resources are destroyed, so they can't even offer up to the Lord the typical drink and grain offering they do. He depicts everything as being barren and destroyed, and then there at the end of verse 12, says, and gladness dries up from all the children of man. So even, gladness is gone from the children. That's how dire their situation is. And then he starts to just kind of describe the situation. Now he's going to start trying to call them to repentance. 13 and 14. Put on sackcloth and lament, O priests. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Go in, pass the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God, because grain offering and drink offering are withheld from the house of your God. Consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. After Joel laments to the people about the state they're living in, he calls to them to repent, to return to God. Tells them you have nothing to offer up to the Lord. Literally, they don't have anything left. So he tells them to have a fast, to gather the people to the house of the Lord, and to cry out to him. I'll read through the end here. Alas, for the day of the Lord is near, and as destruction from the Almighty it comes. Is not the food cut off before our eyes, joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seed shrivels under the clods, the storehouses are desolate, the granaries are torn down, because the grain has dried up. How the beasts groan, the herds of cattle are perplexed, because there is no pasture for them. Even the flocks of sheep suffer. To you, O Lord, I call, for fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and flame has burned all the trees of the field. Even the beasts of the field pant for you, because the water brooks are dried up, and fire has devoured the pasture of the wilderness. So here he starts with telling them that the Lord has brought destruction upon them. And then once more he speaks of how ruined and hopeless their situation is. How even the beasts groan because there's nothing for them to eat either. And then in verse 19 it says, to you, O Lord, I call. So at this point, Joel calls out to God and speaks to him of the desolation and the destruction they're dealing with. And then, those last two verses, it speaks of, it says, for fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and flame has burned all the trees of the field. So it's likely they that's probably literal. They probably set fire to what they had and could to try to burn the locusts out. Next week, there's more of this. It continues on. And then the second chapter gets into the God trying to literally, through Joel, call them back to him. The return to God. This first chapter is a real poetic description of the state of their nation. Anybody have anything they wanted to add or mention? I don't know. Yeah. I couldn't imagine seeing so many. They were just like an ocean. That sounds terrible. Yeah, that would be quite humbling. All right, well, this wasn't a very long one. Thank you.